I'm Jenna Walsh, registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. Thank you again for joining me. This is our fourth Food in 15. Definitely appreciate everybody that sent in questions in the last week or so. I'm going to focus today on digestive health. Okay, so I've had a few questions regarding constipation, a few people asking specifically about celiac disease versus gluten intolerance, and also a few other questions too about probiotics. So we're going to get started. I'm going to do my best to actually be done within 15 minutes this week. So I've sort of tailored the questions to be able to fit. Okay. If you have questions while I'm speaking, by all means, please put them in the comments and I will try to get to them if I have time. If not, I'll table them for the next time that we have our Food in 15. Okay, so let's get started. The first question I had was from a parent whose son was recently diagnosed with celiac disease and was feeling very overwhelmed in terms of how to adjust their meal planning, their food staples, and also not leave that child feeling sort of isolated. Okay, so biggest thing that we look at that I sort of encourage people to start with, because you're absolutely right, totally overwhelming to suddenly have to go completely gluten-free. So first thing I always say is have a look at what your usual day looks like. What kind of foods is your child eating every day that contain gluten? And what alternatives are they okay with swapping to, right? So for example, if they eat Shreddies, can they swap to Chex, which is naturally gluten-free? If they like oatmeal or eggs, that's fairly simple. You do have to make sure with celiac disease, for example, that the oats are completely certified gluten-free. It takes about about 50 milligrams of gluten that can cause damage to the gut with celiac disease, which is about a 16th, I believe, of a slice of bread. So it's really not a lot, and it can be enough even in terms of cross-contamination, which we'll talk about. So start with, sort of what those staples are that you're having for breakfast, for lunch, for supper, and for snacks, and what simple switches that you can do without getting overwhelmed with the cost of gluten-free foods and also trying to make everything from scratch. So start there. Then start thinking in terms of really basic foods, right? There are a lot of naturally gluten-free foods. Your fruits, your veggies, most of your proteins, especially like in whole form. So where you're seeing, that caution area is if they're breaded, right? So try your best in terms of sticking with staples. So your basic fruits and veggies, your basic proteins, dairy as well is gluten-free for the most part, right? So a lot of wheat and gluten-containing products will be added to help thicken foods, right? So some yogurts may have gluten added in, or dairy-based foods. So just be cautious there. So start with those very simple things to get going. Soups, salads, those bento type meals are super awesome for kids for lunches. So doing like some cheese, maybe some plain rice crackers, you might do some hummus, and then, veggies and fruit. That's really simple. And you don't have to stress around, is this product gluten-free or not? Then we look at, suppers we're going back to basics. Meat, potatoes, veggies, easiest way to go. In terms of potatoes, then we may swap that out for sweet potatoes. You may swap it out for squashes. If they don't love that and you guys are big on, pastas, you can get some great bean-based pastas. I've shared some of those on my website. And also the rice pastas are actually quite good. So start with those simple things to get going. The other really thing that I always encourage is join a celiac or a gluten-free support group. Facebook has fantastic local in terms of being in Renfrew County, and they're great because other shoppers who are really looking for those gluten-free foods and want to give you, their opinion on the quality and how it tasted, and did it compare to the gluten-containing version. So they're a fantastic group. I've joined a few just in terms of professionally being able to know where some of those really fantastic products are. So also make sure you join a support group. So once we sort of set that basic of, what kind of things do I have in my home that have gluten that I have to swap? What kind of staple meals can I kind of get into survival mode for the next few weeks until it feels okay? Then we dive into, okay, what's what recipes, what mixes, what, bread recipes do we love that we can try? And focus on one thing to make and sort of find that key recipe for at a time. Because the other thing we have to start looking at is, what supplements, what medications, what skincare, what shampoo are they using that potentially has gluten in it, right? So when we try to dive into all of that at once, it can be super, super overwhelming. So if you can break it up into sections and get the base covered and then dive into really looking for those potential cross-contamination, hidden sources of gluten that might be in food products, and you can really start to tweak everything. The other thing to really look at is, so especially in kids when they're diagnosed, we typically have some red flags that come up prior to. So we may see slowed growth or delay. They may be shorter in stature. They may have sort of unexplained anemia or low iron. And again, that all has to do with the digestive tract and it being damaged and not being able to absorb the nutrients. So we want to keep track of that. So even after diagnosis, we want to be getting some repeat blood work. We want to, if there's been weight loss or slow growth, we really want to focus on really nutrient dense, calorie dense foods, because most kids can actually do catch up as well. So aside from the iron, we're going to be checking ferritin regularly to make sure those stores build back up. The other thing is, a lot of people with celiac disease, if there's gluten in the diet and it's damaging the gut, about 25-30% can also have lactose intolerance. So we do see that within kind of 6 to 12 months of following a gluten-free diet, most can tolerate lactose again. So if not, then we know it's a true lactose intolerance, but just give the gut time to be able to heal. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it was a bit of an overview. There are some fantastic gluten-free guides as well, meal planners and things to get started with. So if you need more information about that, just let me know and send me a message. Okay, so and also celiac.ca is a fantastic place to start. And also register. You can register your kid or yourself as well. Okay. So on to next question. I had two people asking in terms of probiotics, whether or not to be taking them, and then also specific types that they should be taking. Probiotics is kind of a big area of research. It's fairly specific. And what I mean by that is when people ask about whether they should be taking, I usually ask why they want to take them. We definitely have fairly good research and studies that are done for the supplemental form. Okay, so the things that you'll see on the shelf. The very challenging piece is that those good studies that show that there is evidence for the use and benefit of probiotics is very specific. So research is typically done like for a specific strain of that bacteria or probiotic in a specific form and a specific dose for a certain reason. And where I would sort of encourage you to go to have a look is probioticchart.ca. Those are our Canadian guidelines around specific strains, dosing, and products that have those strains. So let's say, for example, you have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, right? There are 1 or 2 strains that have been studied well and do show some benefit. But you need to be taking that specific strain and dose for the expected results that were shown in that study. And what that means is, if you're taking a different sort of generic brand, it may still give you beneficial growth and overall improvement in terms of your gut microflora, but it may not be specific to reduce your IBS symptoms. Okay, so that's where we start. We start in terms of, why are you taking? Is it related to maybe you had to recently take some antibiotics? And we do know that definitely wipes out the bad stuff, but it also takes some of the good with it. There's a certain strain of probiotic that can be helpful in terms of reducing the side effects of antibiotics. And again, it's specific in terms of the dose. So the probiotics on the shelf, I really try to encourage people to save for medical-based issues such as Crohn's or colitis or IBS or antibiotic use, or maybe after you've had a viral GI infection, okay? Because it's specific strains. Probiotics are not cheap. And the other piece, there was an interesting study that was done out of BC actually, and they pulled, I believe, 14 different strains of probiotics and started to assess them, okay, in terms of quality and whether or not they actually contained the amount and also type of probiotics that they advertised. And the big thing too with probiotics is we want the live cultures. So what they found was only about 10 to 15% had the amount of probiotics that they were claiming to have, and that they were still viable. All right, so it's challenging because they're advertising the amount that are available in that product at the time of manufacturing. So depending, they all have sort of a shelf life and a way that they need to be stored properly. So what does that mean, right? So biggest thing is, if you're looking in terms of generic gut health, you want to boost that immune system, you want to make sure your digestive tract is working well, that it's well balanced, that digestion is working, meaning bowel movements are good. We want to start with food, right? So probiotics are naturally found in fermented foods. So if you're thinking in terms of like kombucha and kimchi and making your own sauerkraut, yogurts, etc., they naturally have the probiotic live cultures in there. Not all sort of, pickles and sauerkraut on the shelf have the live bacteria. They may just be in a brine, so you need to separate those. If you need clarification with that, just shoot me a message and we can go through it. So first thing I would say is make sure you're eating some of those regularly. And the other thing that we want to focus on is actually, let's say we have a fairly healthy gut bacteria. We need to feed them to keep them living. And that's where the prebiotics come in. And really all those are certain types of carbohydrates that the bacteria in our gut feed off of, all right? Some really fantastic ones like your onions, your garlic, your asparagus, bananas are great as well. So having a variety of those, having lots of fruits and veggies, fermented foods are a great place to start, okay? All right, so one of the last questions that I'll probably be able to get to actually is related to gallbladder. So I had my gallbladder out in February and still sort of feeling like I'm having some diarrhea and a lot of gas. Do I need to stick to a low-fat diet forever? Okay, so this is actually quite common. Having gallbladder removal is quite common. What the gallbladder is basically this pouch. So your liver makes bile. Bile helps to break down and actually absorb the fat that you eat. So your body is really efficient and makes extra in case we need it, and we store it in this pouch so that when we eat a meal, if we eat more fat than we normally do, we have extra bile there ready to go. So that lots of different things can happen where we need that removed. Even with that gone, your body, your liver, still makes bile, okay? So there is definitely a period of time after we have our gallbladder removed that we can maybe need to be a little bit more cautious and strict with increasing the fat intake with each meal, right? And you have to think too in terms of, we need a certain amount of fat in our diet, but if we just sort of have, say, that 50, 60 grams in one meal, that is a lot of fat for your body to try to digest in one shot. And so what we want to look at is we still need to spread that out. And that goes back to that very basic like plate method of, balance at regular intervals through the day. So balance protein, balance fat, your fiber, etc. So we want to spread it out through the day into smaller meals. Everybody that I've seen regarding this issue has been fairly individualized. So some people can tolerate a little bit more, some people a little bit less. It sort of depends on how your liver's functioning and also what it can tolerate in terms of that load. So biggest thing I would start with is if you were already following a low-fat diet, which typically is around 40, 50 grams per day, start there. So start there, and if you're eating like 3 meals a day and then maybe a snack, so you're looking at maybe 15, 20 grams at a meal, right? Depending how you're doing. Maybe lower, 10 grams at a meal and maybe 10, 15 at a snack. Start there and see how you do, and then gradually increase a little bit. If you go out to eat and you have a much richer, higher fat meal and you have digestive issues, sort of reflect back in terms of what you had. A lot of the restaurants will actually have their nutrition information online. It's a great place to start in terms of, okay, what was it that I just had? How many grams of fat did I have? If it was like 40 grams in a meal and you had significant diarrhea and bloating and gas, it's too much. You can eventually, like if you're really struggling, there are exogenous enzymes that you can take, or pill form is what I mean. So lipase is one of them. And really it's just the enzyme that also helps to break down fat. So we can have a tweak to the diet as well that way. Okay, so not to despair, you can get there, and you can still get typically enough fat in your diet to manage. Okay. All right, guys. I did have another 2 questions. I'm going to table them for the next time so that I actually keep you on time. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really enjoying these. I love getting your questions, so please shoot them my way. Just PM them to me privately, or send them in this thread as well. Okay, so hope you're all staying well, and I will catch you again in another week for our Food in 15. Take care.